Sorry about the technical difficulties. That's on me. So Herb has remedied those, and so we're thankful for him. All right, so tonight we want to continue our study on conversational evangelism, and we're going to talk about the builder role tonight. I want to start by just doing a little review. Let's see here. Get our tech going. All right. Okay, great. So let's review where we are and where we've been. So when we first started our talk about conversation evangelism, we talked about the musician role. That's the first role, where we listen to people, we hear their story, and we listen for their sour notes. And then we moved into the artist role. It's the second role that we engage when we are talking about conversational evangelism, where we ask people clarifying questions that help surface issues in their worldview. And then last week, we talked about the archaeologist role, where we ask questions to help uncover the true barrier to faith that people often have. And oftentimes, that true barrier to faith is not evidential or emotional, it's volitional. It's an issue of the will. I did an interview last night. I've been doing some interviews for a class that I'm taking on evangelism, and the person that I interviewed last night, his issue is volitional. It's not evidential. He's been given lots of evidence. His issue is an issue of the will. He just doesn't want it to be true. So now, tonight we want to move to the builder role, and the builder role, as Geisler talks about it, is in this role, we're ready to build a plan of action that could open the door to share the gospel message with others. We want to build a bridge to the gospel. So we've gone all through the first roles, and now we're at the builder role. This is the builder role, where we are going to try to build a bridge to the gospel. And this role is completed in steps. So, the first step, we prepare we look for common ground. We build a bridge starting at shared beliefs. And we have a basic apologetic outline. We have a goal in mind. And our goal is to remove obstacles and barriers so that they can take a step toward Jesus. And we build a case for Christianity, and we take any opportunity to shift from this pre-evangelism, conversational evangelism, to direct evangelism, where we share the gospel. Now, we need to make sure in this role that we have a proper evidential balance. Okay? We can't just offer one type of evidence, because that's not what some people need. Okay? So we need to try to find a proper balance in our evidence. We need objective evidence and subjective evidence. Okay? Objective and subjective evidence. So what's the difference? Objective evidence, I like to call this the Sergeant Joe Friday. Dragnet, y'all remember Sergeant Joe Friday? Just the facts man. Okay, so this is type of evidence, just the facts type of evidence. This type of evidence is what many commonly think of apologetics. Okay, that's what we generally do in apologetics. So evidence for scriptural reliability. Why should we believe that the scriptures that we have are reliable? What's the evidence for the resurrection? Okay, what are the proofs for the existence of God? Those are the objective evidences some of the objective evidence that we have. Why does God allow evil? We can have an objective talk about that. Okay? And the subjective evidence. So what is subjective evidence? How God lives in our lives. Okay? How we live because we are believers. And how God has changed our lives and answered our prayers. That's subjective evidence. Now, notice I didn't say subjective opinion. I said objective and subjective what? Evidence. So just because something is, quote, subjective, doesn't mean that it doesn't qualify as evidence. It is evidential. It is just a different type of evidence. And we need both. Okay? And we have to be discerning in this regard. What kind of person are we talking to? Where are they? Well, we've gone through all the other roles. Kind of what is their issue? What kind of evidence do they need? And we need to make sure that we are paying attention to that and being discerning so that we offer the right kind of evidence. So, we'll find that when we talk to people, there are probably some things on which we can't agree. Okay? One of the big things that we want to do in this particular role is we want to find some common ground. Okay? So he explains it as finding common ground involves discovering those mutually shared ideas that can be a springboard for deeper spiritual dialogue with our non-believing friends. Things like, what Hitler did was really, really bad and wrong. What's the common ground there? Morality. And that there is a morality that applies to all people. Okay? We don't like what Hitler did just because it's against our personal views. We don't like what Hitler did because it's objectively wrong for anybody to kill 7 million innocent people just because of their heritage. So, we can have some very common things like that. Okay? Some very common things on which we agree. Things like, hey, I enjoy martial arts and my neighbor enjoys martial arts. That's common, right? Or, hey, we have kids that go to the same school and they're in the band. That's common. Okay? And then we can have more specific. Like, I believe there's a God. Okay? He may believe in a different kind of God, but the fact that he believes that there is some kind of God out there is a commonality that we would have with somebody, but it's a little bit more specific. Okay? It's a common ground that we would have, but it's more specific. So, here's some questions we can talk about when we think about the more specific. So, let's say we have a friend, our kids are in band. I know this because I know there's band parents in here, right? You meet people in band as band parents that you would probably never otherwise meet. Okay, from all over the place. So, what's the common interest? Kids in band. Right? Kids in band, getting kids where they need to go, through marching season, and then traveling the country with our kids at all crazy hours of the day and night. Okay? That's our common thing, right? That's what we have in common. But maybe if we're on one of those band trips, we say, we're having a conversation, maybe we're all sitting at a restaurant together, and we maybe would say, does what people believe matter? How can all people be right? Do you think that having faith in a God is sufficient, or do you think we need something more? Do you think Jesus is the same as other religious prophets or gods? So, very specific, right? Those are heavy questions, but they're specific. Why is it so important that we have common ground? Why can't we just get to it, right? Why can't we just go on a band trip and be the antagonist parent who just asks all kinds of crazy questions, right? There are some. Right? And we're chuckling in the audience because at one point we were probably one. Okay? It shows when we seek common ground and we look for it, it shows the other person that there actually is some. That we're just not all different. Because sometimes I think they look at Christians and they think, they're just weird. We are. But they're just weird. They're just so different from me. They don't even have a clue about what's going on in my life. They don't even have a clue about what's going on with my kids. They don't have a clue what's going on in my house, in my marriage, my bills, my yeah. They don't have a clue about that. But when we have some common ground, both common and specific, it shows, hey, there is some common ground and we have some of the same things. Maybe we have some of the same issues going on with our kids. It demonstrates good faith, right? It says, hey, you're not a project, or hey, I'm not trying to come at you with some kind of ulterior motive. It just demonstrates good faith on our part, that we really are interested in this person's life, what's going on in their life. Paul gives us an example of this all the time, right? He always found some kind of common ground, right? Remember when he walked through the city, right? And then he goes up to make his defense at the Areopagus, right? What did he find as he walked through the city? All these statues of these gods, right? So what does he go in and say, y'all are heathens and you're going to hell? What is his first thing that he says? I can see that you're a very religious people. And in fact, I even see all of these gods around, these statues to these gods, and I even saw one to the unknown God. Let me tell you about that unknown God. Common ground. And when we do this, it encourages more dialogue. Once we begin to really get into the surfacing and the questioning so that the differences start to be apparent between Christianity and other religions. It gives us the ability to dialogue. It builds goodwill. It gives us some theological capital. That's what I would call that. Some theological capital. And just some human capital when we start to have these deeper conversations. It allows them to tell us why they are right and we are wrong. And they need to be able to do that. Because that's part of their story. And we need to hear that. We need to understand it. And it allows them to tell us why they think they're right and we're wrong. And they're more likely to want to hear what we have to say because we've taken the time to listen to them and to hear them out. They feel valued. They feel like we care. And we do. It's part of being a Christian. And once we establish common ground, this is where we start to build the bridge. So we don't jump right in there before we have any common ground. Most of the time, this is where we're going to build the bridge, from our common ground. So if someone believes in God, if someone believes in a theistic God, if someone believes in a monotheistic God, if someone believes in God, the God concept of the three great monotheistic religions, that's our common ground, right? Our specific common ground, a belief in a theistic God. Okay? And this starts with trying to establish that there's Guys, everybody gets this. Even if they don't know about Big Bang and cosmology and all this, they get this. Every human being gets this, and Moreland is really onto something. I think, out of all of those that I've ever talked about to somebody, the one that seems to be the most common that everybody can get is that moral argument for the existence of God. Because everybody deals with that every single day. Now, we've established a creator, right? We've established that there is a creator that exists. That is reasonable to believe that there is a creator that exists. And if God exists and is the creator, then we're responsible to him. Why do we have such a responsibility? Think about all the other people and all the other entities to whom we're responsible. Our parents, our government, other authority figures, our church. We're responsible to a lot of other people's and entities, right? And think about the value that we place on that kind of accountability, right? Why do we not go and speed as quick as we can out here on the road here in front of the church? Because we have what? A responsibility to others and to the governing authority, which posted the signs that say, "Don't exceed the speed limit." And we place a lot of value on that, right? We don't want to hurt somebody. We don't want to get a ticket. We don't want to be pulled over by the government authority. Yet none of those entities and people are our creator. Not one of them. And if we're accountable to them, how much more are we responsible to the creator of all of this? Is it not responsible or reasonable to hold that we have enormous accountability to him? And that's what I'd ask the person that I was talking to. If there's a creator, and I've given you some reasons to believe that there is, aren't we accountable to that creator? And that's plank 1 of our bridge. Yet, if there is a creator and we're responsible to him, how successful are we with that accountability to him? How successful are we to be able, and how often are we successful and uphold his standards that he has for us? Not very. Not very. And in fact, we're not just rotten at upholding his standards, but we don't even uphold our own standards. The personal ones that we think are important. Like being a good mom, being a good dad, being a good husband, being a good worker, being a good citizen. How many times do we fail at upholding those standards? And those are our personal ones. And that's our second plank. God exists. We're accountable to Him. And yet, we can't uphold His standards. Can't even uphold our own standards. And we can ask those questions. So each and every one of us has a problem. We all have a problem. What is that problem? We don't fulfill our responsibility to our Creator. We don't maintain our own standards. What's our problem? I include myself. Just ask anybody that knows me. They'll let you know. I'm a sinner. That's my problem. And given what we've discussed about standards, isn't that true of all human beings? That our problem is that we're sinners? That we don't follow the standards of our Creator? And that's our third plank. And if we can't get this right on our own, we got a problem, right? We have a Creator, He's got standards, we don't follow them, we can't meet them, we can't meet our own, we've got a problem, and our problem is we're sinners. And I can't get it right on my own, by my own power. I need some help. I need assistance. We need somebody to solve our own problem. So we ask the question, if we can't get this right on our own, don't we need some assistance outside of ourselves to help us? And that's our fourth plank. Some will say, oh, I can solve this. I can just do good things, right? Works doesn't solve our problem. I'll give you an example. I break shalom with my wife. Okay, you are looking at me like, yeah, she'd kill you. Right? But let's just say I break shalom with my wife. Okay, and can I restore that shalom by doing good deeds? If that's not the case with my own wife, I can't restore that relationship. If I can't restore that peace, if I can't restore things the way they should be in that relationship with works, what makes me think that I can do that with my Creator? I can't. And so I need some help. That help is Jesus. Maybe we say, after we ask all those questions that we talked about, hey, would you like for me to tell you about a person who can give you the assistance that you need to meet those standards, to solve that problem that you have? See, Jesus is the only person in any religion who's ever claimed to be able to solve the sin problem. He's unique. He claims he can take it away, he can solve it. And he's the only person who's ever lived, fully God, fully human, who lived a sinless life. He's not like all the others. He's unique. He's unique in his person, and he's unique in his claims, and he's unique in what he did. Now, we're going to continue next week. I wanted to lay this groundwork tonight so that we could establish these first important planks. And next week, you remember the 5 steps that we started with. We're going to finish those. But these are powerful questions as we start to build. And they're really, really important that we think about them. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody have any thoughts? Yes, Amy.
So you were at the beginning, you were talking about subjective evidence and how what I pulled from that is that experience doesn't negate evidence.
Okay, so Amy's question is, when we were talking about subjective and objective evidence, she wanted to know about the experience, and she's like, experience doesn't negate evidence. I think experience is evidence.
Right, but other people will say, well, like when you live your truth, and you speak your
Yeah.
truth, because this is my evidence for why God doesn't exist, because X, Y, Z.
Right. So how do you navigate someone saying, well, that's just your personal experience? It's not evidence. Is that kind of your question?
Or how when they will say, well, this is my evidence.
Well, this is my experience. Yeah. You have to. It's not an exact science, but you have to. I think it depends on the person. The person that I was talking to last night, he told me about his personal experience growing up in a Christian home, and what has gotten him away is that he saw his mom go from church to church and change her beliefs over and 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 over again. And what I said to him was, yeah, I'm sorry that happened. But talk to people. First, there's all kinds of evidence out there, regardless of whether she was a hypocrite or a bad Christian. Don't allow a bad Christian to keep you from answering and searching out the truth. But I think Christianity is unique in that our experiences line up with the other objective evidence. And so what I try to do when someone talks to me about my personal experience and they don't really want it, they want to go, hey, that's your truth, this is my truth, this is your experience, that's my experience. Okay, maybe, but how does your experience line up with the objective evidence? My experience lines up with the objective evidence. And so I think from the evidence perspective, that mine lines up better. Now, I'm going to put that into a question, right? Hey, I understand that, but can you help me understand, how does your experience line up with the facts of atheism? Can you explain that to me? Right? And can you help me understand why my subjective experience that lines up with the objective evidence of Christianity doesn't correspond to reality? Something along those lines. You have to be really discerning with the person because every person is different, right? I think, like I said, I think subjective evidence, but we also need at that point to kind of try to figure out what's their issue, and hopefully we've figured out their barrier. I mean, we're taking that, we don't know what the other person's issue is, right? Their actual barrier. So we hopefully we've done that by then, and we can kind of tailor that. If we haven't, we really need to dig in and try to see what that is at that point, right? If they just reject all subjective experience, because maybe the issue could be, well, you seem to not want to accept my subjective evidence as evidence that can be relied upon. However, you want me to accept yours. how is that? You got to help me with that. Because I'm offering you my experience and you're saying, that's just experience, but then you're saying to me, this is my experience and this is why you should think it true. So it's very self-refuting position. Yeah, it's a great question. This takes some time. It takes time. And it takes kind of constantly going back and having these conversations with folks. And one of the things we'll talk about, next week is so we've got the first, 5 planks on the bridge, but we haven't built the bridge yet, right? And so one of the things we're going to talk about next week is, hey, what kind of evidence do they need? Do they need emotional evidence? Do they need heart evidence? Do they need more head, hard, objective evidence as we build this bridge? But we really have to start where we started tonight so that we can then get there, right? We've got to so what we were doing tonight was taking that common ground and just building from it and establishing that there's a creator, establishing we've got this responsibility, and establishing we don't live up to it, and we need some help, and we got a problem. And there's one person that can do that. Right? So now we can then go, okay, we've got that established. Now we're going to move to the type of evidence that we need for them. So that may help some next week too. But that's a great question. It's an art, right? We've got to be prepared, and we've got to be open to what the Spirit is going to help us with. But I always try to get people to play fair with me. Hey, can you play fair with me? If you want me to look at your experiences as evidential, can you look at mine too? And most people will, right? I'm glad to look at yours. Can you look at mine? A lot of times people who are in that type of my experiential issue, that's emotional or volitional usually. And usually once you help them process the fact that you understand where they are emotionally with their experience. For instance, someone who just says, these Christians were awful to me. They're just a bunch of hypocrites. Well, what's that? That's a pain issue. That's a emotional issue. It's hurt that we've got to do. And once we deal with that particular situation and we just explain to them, hey, not everybody in Christianity is like that. Just like not everybody in the world are murderers or rude or, we try not to paint that broad brush in the world. Please, can I help you not maybe start to think about Christians with that broad brush as much? And just kind of see where they are. It's going to be a back and forth kind of give and take there when you're going through it. So I think the thing that is useful here is our willingness to have the conversations and our willingness to work hard to build that common ground. And you may not see them just that night go there, but eventually if they take a step, then that's what we're going to do, and maybe you don't know how many other people have worked on them before you. And maybe you have a conversation with them, a couple of conversations, and all of a sudden that experiential doubt or this, why is your experience any better than mine goes away. And all of a sudden now they're wanting to have this direct evangelism talk. It just depends on, kind of what it is. I always try to package both if I can. But if it's a person who has really, really emotional issues, you got to deal with those. You got to deal with the hurt piece. They're not looking for the hard objective. They're looking for that, tell me why I should be a Christian when I've seen these Christians act so ugly to people. So I always try to package it together, and that may not always be the right thing. And so, even though I've studied and I've done this for a long time, this has really challenged me to be better at trying to really listen and trying to figure out exactly what folks need and where they are. Because I always thought, well, I'll just package it. I'll package the objective and the experiential and we'll be good. Well, maybe not, because maybe they don't want both of those. They just need you to tell them why they can trust you to love them. Why can they trust Jesus to love them when Jesus' disciples didn't before? Any other questions, thoughts? No? All right. So we are going to do our last session third Wednesday. So not next week, following week. Okay? That's going to be our last conversational evangelism session, which will be third Wednesday. Okay? 7 o'clock. Sorry about the technical difficulties tonight, but we got them fixed, and Herb's our hero, as usual. So, all right, so keep Pastor and Gigi in your prayers. He's recovering from COVID, but has got an E. coli infection that he is dealing with, but he thinks he will be good by Friday. So I don't think he'd be mad at me so they need our continued prayers so that they are back with us soon and healthy. So let's pray and we can be dismissed. Gracious God, thank you for tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to come and to talk about and to think about how to evangelize other people, how to have conversations with them about you, Lord. Lord, help us as we go out into our spheres of influence to have opportunities to talk to others about you, Lord. Give us wisdom. Give us a desire for others to tell them about the good news. And help us, Lord, to be brave and filled with grace. And help us, Lord, to just be willing to be in the battle, talking to people, meeting people, sharing the good news of Christ with them. The world seems really dark and out of control right now, Lord. And in many instances, it is. But we do know that you are sovereign and that you are on your throne. And that the answer to all of this is the love of Jesus Christ and the salvation he offers. Thank you for giving it to me. Thank you for giving it to everyone that is here tonight. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.